Why was it important for you to tell this story and to tell it this way?
Well, I always had this idea of doing a version of Fedra, and I connected it to that time in Tribeca. And I just felt it fit very well in that period. It's really a pretty straight-ahead soap opera tragedy, and it seemed to fit in that period, in that context, around that bar and that kind of nightlife.
Heather, do you want to talk about some of the improv elements?
Sure. Yeah. So when reading the script first, it was like poetry to me, and I didn't quite understand how everything was fitting together with the chorus. And John would give me some characters for me to focus on. So when coming to the day of the shoot, I was just kind of telling some of my own stories. Maybe some were made up, some were fantasies, maybe some weren't. And then I would add the characters of his design into this and making a composite of these different stories and kind of weaving them all into a composite. So you just kind of, John gave you the freedom to kind of make things your own. But he was kind of like a journalist as a director too, and asking questions to kind of guide you to get what he needed, I think. But you had a master plan in your brain somewhere that maybe we were not all aware of. Is that true?
So the script is about half scripted and half questions. And the questions are meant to draw specific details that will add a kind of realism, to the script. And I was interested in two things in that. One, that all of us, when we go through these experiences, these tragedies, all make ourselves the center of it to some degree. But also, there's just that moment when the camera goes off and everybody comes alive, So I really wanted to have that. I wanted to work one-on-one with actors and really be able to bring out details from their own lives that they believed. On the other hand, I really wanted those details to be specific. I didn't want it to be a very loosey-goosey kind of improv.
Okay, I have to ask about the dog in the whiskey glass.
Oh, the dog in the glass. So did you guys see the dog in the glass?
Yeah.
So the dog in the glass is so Magda's here, and my mom is here. But my stepfather, Willie Lenski, did a film where there was a barking dog in a glass. And it just seemed, it always seemed to me just like a wonderful image, but there's something about nightlife and then the way that world kind of just takes over, can possess you. That seemed really apropos, and so I borrowed the image.
Do you want to talk about some of the different locations? The different locations that you shot?
So we were at a bunch of different locations. They were mostly very, very controlled environments. Sound studios, theaters, where else? A hotel room in one location. So what we did was, in post-production, added a lot of sound elements that put us in about 1982, 1983. So that was the idea, that we would shoot these very kind of bald locations and then sound design in post-production. So when Jamie is sitting in that theater room and you hear the people clapping around with their dance shoes, we were just in totally empty theater. So the idea was that we were going to do a lot of that location stuff with audio.
Yeah, so talk about how they're working in such an arty film environment.
An arty film environment?
An arty film environment.
Well, it was very, you had a lot of freedom, I guess. But with the technology, you mean? What do you mean?
With the technology.
Well, you get used, these days as an actor, you have to get used to working with the technology because it's a primary thing of everything. You have to get used to having cameras in your face.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I come from the avant-garde world in theater too, so that we work with technology all the time. It's just part of the makeup of how you have to work as an actor with the technology all the time because it's so a huge part of the scene, right? For theater and film, video. Did I answer that properly?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
There was so many,
it's experimental answer.
there were so many layers to the film. So, John, do you want to talk a little bit about that and then open it up?
The layers of, I mean, of the post-production stuff, or the?
Well, I mean, the film itself, there's the story, and then there's the story, and then also with post-production, so it's just like, it's a multi-layered film, it's more than one way, but
Well,
literally and
there's-
figuratively.
There's something about I really did want you to feel that each person in the narrative was at the center of his or her own story, you know, his or her own narrative. Because I feel like that's the way we experience stories, you know. We hear a story and then it comes right back to us. And I think it's wonderfully interesting, and that really is the way that we're sharing stories. So in that element, I was seeking to bring everybody else's story into this story. On the post-production, in terms of the layering, am I getting a lot of feedback?
Oh, yeah.
Is that better?
No.
Should we switch?
See, technology.
So on the post-production, basically, it was shot all on just DSLRs, on Sony's and Samsung's, very, very straight ahead. Nothing magical about it, but I wanted it to feel like an unfinished film cut in like 1982 or 83. Because, you know, stories are unfinished, right? So I wanted it to have that feel like it had come out of the edit room and you were seeing kind of like a cut, an early cut of the film.
All right, we should probably open it up now. All right.
I have a lot of questions. Congratulations, everyone. Influences visually on the project?
You know, I mean, I think that the obvious influence, the obvious trajectory of the influence here that kind of is the New York history of cinema, starting with B movies through Warhol. The idea was really to have like, you know, when I think about the specific look, I am thinking about No Wave in like the 80s period that it was set in. I wanted it to have that kind of stark look, and the color grade is actually very much, it's Fuji, it's just, the color grade is Fujifilm stock from that period. So I wanted to be true to that period. On the other hand, you know, there was nothing, there was no digital, you couldn't shoot at high resolutions then. I mean, you really, it wouldn't be possible to make this film. But I wanted to bring that to our contemporary consciousness in the way that when you look at costumes, you know, it's not really the way people dressed in 1890. But as much as is feasible, you're bringing it to your contemporary mindset.
And then just to follow up, I need you to clarify this issue of, is it a documentary? I thought this was a fiction film.
So this is, it's sort of, it fits in the category of experimental documentary because it is fiction. But a lot of it, but more than half of it is actually real life stuff from the actors. I would say half to 2/3 of it is real life stuff from the actors. I could show you the script if you don't believe me.
You did not believe you were making a documentary.
Well, it's all shot doc style. I mean, the actors, there's only one shot where there are actually two actors on the set. You know, all of it is shot in an extremely conservative documentary manner, with two cameras, one dead ahead, one off to the side. I mean, that's the style. I mean, you may not forgive me, but that's the I think experimental documentary, I think it fits, but not always.
I'll hand back the microphone in a second, but it reminds me, are you familiar with Renata Adler's Speedboat? You know, that book in particular raises a lot of questions about what is fiction and what is documentary. So,
Well, I can tell you
That
that
comes
there
to
were
mind.
actually, of all the actors that you saw, right, the casting was really specific. I wanted the people from the Hippolytus story who were gods to look really different, right? So you have Donnie, Candy, Poe. You know, Donnie and Candy would have been gods in the original story. And Phaedra had to be a mortal who was so beautiful that she could inspire the jealousy of the gods, right? So those people had to look really different, I thought. And Candy and Donnie, all of their lines were scripted. They're very, very sort of straight ahead, independent cinema actors. The rest of the people I really, really wanted to feel alive, and they're mostly people with a great deal of theater experience, who could really just come out of the screen as people that you believed. So there were kind of two trajectories on the casting. And each one of those people would have, let's say, I don't know, 3 to 10 lines that were scripted, or sections that were scripted. And a few of them didn't have any scripted material at all. So I think there were the questions to direct people, but I would say about 2/3 of the film is just people talking about their real lives.
The film is so visually striking, and you seem to be creating a myriad of looks. And beyond using the Fuji, just for the tech nerds in the audience, could you talk a little bit about how you went about creating some of these looks, particularly like Farrah walking around early? How did you do it when you shot it or in post?
So, we did, basically there are 3 kind of grades. One is the Fuji film grade, which is the stuff that would have been shot in 1982. So that's the majority of the film. Then there's some stuff that's kind of video. That's the stuff, I guess there's like video and film from the Catskills, which is all supposed to be like home movie kind of stuff. And then on Poe and Farrah, I did, basically it's black and white with only 2 colors added. So there's only yellow and red on those shots. It's Fuji black and white, but obviously the red and yellow are digital effects. It might have been possible to do that then. It feels inferior to me, but it would have been very, very difficult. In terms of shooting it, it was mostly shot, those shots, we were able to do them with DSLRs in a way that, in 1983 you would have loved to be able to do that, but it was really, really hard to get that resolution. We walked around the San Gennaro Film Festival shooting CD and bonked a few people on the heads with equipment and just prayed nobody remembered who we were. We did some pretty run and gun stuff around the city to get that stuff shot. Other questions?
I see a familiarity with the area of Tribeca that you grew up in, or you probably recall from when you were pretty small. And just the general feel of the setting and what was going on in your film make me wonder how much of that is actually put together from your sort of recollection of that time period and your life as a Tribeca kid of artist parents who were experiencing that kind of nightlife. What was your impression? It reminds me of something that might have been your impression of that.
I think that's true. I was trying to cast people who I could imagine in the time period, but I also wanted, by bringing it to like a Greek myth, I wanted it to feel mythical, sort of beyond there's something that happens in memory, right, where things are just elevated and become, you know, not what happened. So I didn't want to lose track of that.
In a story like this, which is emerging out of conversations, and you said it yourself that the stories have a sense of not being finished, which comes out in the way they're visually depicted as well. How do you as a writer and director reach a point where you feel like I'm finished with these stories now, and you know, what's that for you?
Well, the script was actually really precise in terms of what details I wanted from every character when. So it's weirdly exactly like the script. The way it is I would have the scripted lines, then I would have questions that would be very, very specific questions to draw a detail out, to make you believe, to make it believable or possible. So I actually just went through question by question and edited it. You know, it is slower cutting improv because you don't know exactly where that line is going to begin or end. But I did pretty much just stick to the script.
I actually have a question.
Sorry, my question, what was your biggest lesson learned?
Well, I have a few silly lessons. We had a few makeup malfunctions, which was really, really a bummer. In terms of the edit, you know, I go back and forth. The one biggest question, I guess, for me would be a tech nerdy question: is how high resolution to shoot it? Because we shot it really high resolution, 4K, which made it really, really slow and cumbersome to edit. It's very, very hard to even show it at that resolution. But on the other hand, looking at it in retrospect, it's hard to imagine not shooting it that way. I feel like you know, I knew for our budget that I had certain constraints as to how much I could do in terms of bringing actors on the set and having a lot of people on the set. So I feel like it's true to its original inception. I don't know if I would be quite as arty on the next project, but that was the idea, you know, if that's the question.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of memory footage and the use of titles and finding the balance in the film? Because I was really interested in where those came and where you got that footage and how that all worked.
So most of the memory footage I shot, and it was variously pretended into memory footage. There were a couple of bits that I got the rights to and used that. Most of the Rogue River stuff was Super 8 or 16mm footage that I repurposed, getting permission from the daughter of the person who shot it. What was the second part of the question?
The titles, like how...
Oh, the titles. So
that was a very strong choice, and I was really curious.
So in old filmmaking, I remembered, again, my stepfather showed me how to do splicing on 8mm film, Super 8 film when I was a kid. And sometimes he would throw in notes, like stuff that he was going to do later. And there's something just so great about that. And that's what it was. I was thinking like, it's like 95% finished, so there are going to be these instructions to you know, post-production elements, and I can use that to my own ends, basically.
How did you come up with the name "The Sky is Blue with Lies"?
I don't know.
Can I ask a question for anybody just to generally answer? Did anyone notice at the very beginning that the time was kind of slowed down a little bit? When it was, no? Do you want to talk just briefly about that?
Well, so Jennifer is catching me here, but when you see the countdown in the beginning, I wanted to slow down time. You know, thinking about Warhol's films a little bit, and you see the countdown in the beginning. It's actually about they're progressively slower seconds. So by the end, it's about 1.5 seconds by the time you get to the bottom number. But I wanted the audience to kind of reset a little bit and think, gosh, a second is really long. And then
But it seems to echo Warhol's Empire State Building.
yeah, that's a direct reference to that shot. One back there.
Oh, we have 10 minutes?
That's right.
Right, okay. Is there any more questions? Yeah.
I'm curious about those interstitial moments, the water tower. I keep thinking about, is this going back to the myth? Is this relating to the characters? There's the water tower and that really strong imagery of the carnival. And then there's this idea of yes, saying yes, but she's walking through the carnival and she never really does anything. And so I was curious if you wanted to talk about some of those in-between moments with that beautiful, the flute music, and you just feel like you're moving through space.
Well, the shots outside are theoretically from Donnie's apartment, looking out the window onto the Hudson, and so I wanted to feel the way he would see things and see this kind of have this experience of seeing very working people, and yet he had grown above it. For the carnival stuff, I feel like those two characters are gone from the beginning. They've already passed away. So what is the kind of afterlife, right? And to me, it seemed like it would just be this endless, either this kind of carnival-esque thing, which becomes purely fantastical, or playing pool and shooting pool in a bar or in a pool hall, and hitting balls in the batting cages endlessly. That was meant to represent these characters having moved on into this kind of transitional space. And the music was all the music we recorded, which was Bach and one of Bach's sons, who specialized in flute solos. And so that was a Baroque flute, and probably there were only 2 Baroque flautists in New York City who could do it, and so we got one of them. So that was all self-explanatory.
Did you do the music because it was Racine's era, the Baroque music? And more generally, I wanted to ask about the narrative arc of the myth is incredibly foreordained. You know who's going to die, you know what's going to happen, and you stuck by that. But there was all this improvisation and documentary, so for both John and the actors, I'd be interested to hear about that tension between the myth, where you know what's going to happen, and then the radical freedom of a lot of the actual rendition of the material.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like exactly what I was interested in the project. On the one hand, the story is really familiar. He falls in love with his stepmother. There's this accusation which causes everybody to freak out and everybody to die. And we know that's a story. Even if you're not familiar with the myth, it feels like that's what's going to happen. But the challenge was to make it feel possible in a certain time period and in a certain context, given the experiences that we have in our lives.
And also, I think you did very effectively. You made the viewer forget about the myth. I forgot about the myth. I came in knowing it was going to be Fedra, but watching it, I forgot it and then remembered. And that was what really moved me about it.
Thank you.
Any for Heather?
Yeah, I have actually one for Heather.
Okay.
All right. So, for me, prioritizing, performance over story and plot, which is just what that gentleman spoke about, to me, that was what makes the film so beautiful. So, how did you feel about that?
What's the question again?
But just, John's prioritizing performance over the
Yeah.
plot per se. And how did you feel about that?
Well, I like to be, it was great for me to be able to create within that moment and just go moment to moment with my thoughts and memories of my own life and filling in the blanks from within the script that John had written. So I put my life in with some of their characters as well. He swirled it all together.
You had a great way of putting it. We were talking earlier.
I did, but I say like coming home from a disco at dawn.
Exactly.
I've never done that before in my life.
Never.
Maybe last night.
I believe just once.
Yeah, but it's it's like the sun's coming up and you're just trying to figure out how you got from point A to point B, and then you're walking home and the sun's just coming up. That's kind of what it feels like. Sunrise, our dawn.
I think that describes the sun really beautifully.
Yeah, sunset.
5 minutes.
Okay. I have my own question. So we're talking about locations and like insert shots, and also about like the references that the film's referencing. But what the impression I got actually was from the very beginning. You like open with a lot of shots of like train tracks, and what that brought me back to was a lot of the city symphony films like Berlin and Man with a Movie Camera, and even the Vendor's Wings of Desire, and Manfred Kirchheimer's Stations of the Elevated. I was wondering, and in a way, this like almost is sort of like a city symphony. It's like meant to be like a portrait of New York and like the greater New York area in the like late 70s, 80s, and I was wondering like if the like the shots of the train tracks, like maybe like what was like the impetus for that that kind of made that sort of necessary.
Well, I guess part of it is that is the idea that none of us can really go home. I wanted to recreate with those shots the way that New York looked in that period, but all of that stuff was shot now. And I also wanted to use it as an element to manipulate the narrative movement of the film. So I tried to really control like which way the train is moving or which way the car is moving. So I was really trying to use that as kind of an underlying structural element to the story itself. But I also wanted with those shots to recreate a period by just shooting and editing what I believed could be in that period.